classes would you want to teach if you had your choice?
Ooh, I'd love to do a Hegel seminar. I haven't really thought about it because it's not really a potential possibility, but I would love to do classes that would interest me as far as my own development, and that would be neat to do those. I learn a lot from everyone's responses to the questions I ask all the time, even though I ask the same question. So, that's part of what makes life interesting, is that everybody has.
How many years have you been asking those questions?
Well, I've had lots of, this is just memory lane here. I've done Intro to Philosophy, Intro to Logic. I've done both of the history courses, the ancient as well as the early. I used to do ethics way back in the 90s. We did the ethics
We didn't
course.
have ethics in the 90s.
There were years that I did the humanities, Intro to Humanities 1 and 2. We don't even have those anymore. For a while, I think I might have mentioned it was funny, I did a course for the philosophy department that was also for the education department. And it was titled Truth, Beauty, and Goodness.
Yes.
And for 8 years, I had the monopoly on truth, beauty, and goodness in Anchorage. I thought that's kind of funny. But I have.
Are you familiar with a fella named Phil Stutz? He's
Not
like this
heard of-
famous psychologist right now, and he writes a book, and part of the book, it's like a becoming book or whatever, and it has a big spiel on truth and philosophy.
Well, that goes way back. I mean, it's kind of like what Plato was trying to figure out. So it has quite a history, and so on. Okay, so just to review what we have coming, today is the last regular class for the class. All we have left is the final, and if you go to the end of the syllabus, I'm pretty darn sure I have, oh, that's the term paper guide. But if my search was right, the meeting time that we have will be Wednesday next week. So the same day as today, next week. But it starts at 10, because it's a double session. So instead of starting at 11:30, we start at 10, and we still go to the regular time. And I said, you don't have to come. It's not a mandatory thing. I don't have a test that you have to take while you're there for that whole, for you to regurgitate everything you had to memorize through this class, about, when David Hume died, 1776. Remember, a great year for Pinot Noir, etc. But I'll be here. That's that's my contract. I'm supposed to be here for the whole, contact hours of the course, for the course to be accredited, which it is, by the way. So your 3 credits will be good wherever you go, I suppose. Did you learn all the right stuff? Good question. The new Trump administration might disagree. That's interesting. I'm fascinated by this whole process of what's going to happen. Okay, so we meet one more time after today. Term papers are due. Please send them in. If you're late and you're working on that's okay. I still accept them, of course, and no points taken. But please do get everything in by the end of the semester, because once that happens, 2 things will happen. Number 1, I'll have to turn in grades, and if I don't have any of your work, I don't add those points, so please do send me everything you want counted. And the other thing that will happen is right when I'm grading all these papers and everything, I have jury duty.
Fun.
My number's like 500 something, so hopefully I won't
Do
actually.
you want it or not want it?
I've come so close to having actual jury duty. I was even, in the jury, sitting there. We were all interviewed and everything, and it was fascinating. The prosecutor asked me her questions, and I answered them. And the very last question she asked is, "Professor Jamison, do you remember that I was one of your logic students years ago?" And I was like, "No, I don't remember that."
The conflict.
But it wasn't a conflict. I was fine because I didn't remember her.
Oh.
That's.
So what did they pick you up for then?
What happened was that the whole thing ended up being canceled because they had some sort of negotiation between the prosecutor and the defendant's attorney, and so they postponed it and they released us, and so that was the closest I ever got to actually sitting through a thing. However, okay, so term papers are due, and the final test I have set. Notice, where do I have that? Don't I have that listed?
I think it's December 12th.
Third exam, there it is. Take this. So, yeah, December 12th, I think the 14th is the actual Saturday that's the last class of the semester, or the last, we don't have a class then. That's just, the finals week is 9 through the 14th, so I have that there. And I'm pretty sure all that's correct. It's one of the most annoying things to try to get right for a syllabus is the way things end. Okay, so that's the plan. So today, my hope was to go over European philosophy, since we really last talked about them. Some of the ones we have talked about, of course, we talked about Marx, we talked about Kierkegaard as the immediate philosophies that came off of Hegel's philosophy. And we talked about Sartre when we talked about existentialism. I don't think I talked about many other folks. But there are other tendencies in European thought that we ought to be familiar with if we want to understand the Europeans, and actually a lot of Americans today. In fact, I'm thinking about the sort of liberal tendency associated with academic philosophy in the United States really has a very European side to it. If you're doing language analysis, you're working on mathematical logic and trying to make our ideas clear and things of that sort, that's very British and very utilitarian, very pragmatic, and so on. But there are other aspects, of course, to our contemporary thinking that we really ought to look at, the Europeans. And one of the first ones I thought we should talk about is Edmund Husserl. And let's do Edmund Husserl. And Husserl is going to give us a philosophy that's called phenomenology. Essentially, it's phenomenology. And remember the main book, the very first one that Hegel gave us, the big one, was the phenomenology of the spirit, right? So consciousness, self-consciousness, social spirit, so sociology. Remember, that's my question on Hegel, if you choose to answer that one, is how did Hegel's philosophy lead us into sociology as a contemporary way of thinking? Um, well, taking the concept of phenomenology, that literally is the study of phenomena. Hegel's book, The Study of Phenomena of Consciousness, essentially, right, of mind. Husserl takes the idea of studying phenomena as a science itself, and not just the phenomenology of consciousness, but phenomenology of every phenomena, basically. And so what his project is, and notice it even mentions here that you bracket it, bracketing. Okay, so thank you, Kant. We can't get to the thing in itself. Hegel says, well, the thing in itself is the consciousness of the society. So the rational is the real, and the real is the rational. So that when we're studying what people think and believe, well, that is actually what we find to be true when we all believe it. There's arguments over who believes what, who's right. Sure, we have that kind of a problem. But when we're all in agreement on something, well, then that's real as far as we're concerned, right? So that's Hegel. But what phenomena means is this is how things appear to human consciousness, to our perception. And so Husserl thought what we ought to do is just study how things appear to humans in all cultures, in all relationships, in all different kinds of institutions. And what we're doing is bracketing it because we're saying we don't know if this applies to some sort of reality outside of the phenomena. All we've got is human experience of phenomena. So let's just study the way phenomena appears to people. And a perfect example of this that I remember in my studies years ago was religion in essence and manifestation. I think let's just find. So, there we go to Amazon again. Sorry about that. In any case, so this 2-volume set was part of the books that I had to read for the philosophy of religion course in my undergraduate years. And philosophy of religion, it's kind of fun. You take theology and you study the science of God. Theo is God, ology, study of. But when you take philosophy, you can study the philosophy of theology, or the philosophy of religion, or the philosophy of science, or the philosophy of history. How do historians work? They haven't all worked the same way, since Thucydides, etc. There's different ways of, and it was only a few, tens of years ago here, where history became one of the arts as opposed to one of the sciences. So instead of thinking of history as a science, we think of it as an art, and every generation can come up with their new interpretation of the past, right?
Oh, because art's more like flowy and it accepts change, but science is more like consistent.
Well, I mean, even contemporaries can disagree on history, obviously, right? They're going to have different opinions on history. Well, we can't decide which one is true. In fact, if it's an interpretation, it's neither true nor false, according to our contemporary interpretation. And so you get this very complex, you can have, the history of the American people from the bottom up. So you're looking at it as how, capitalism or the rich or the oppressors did terrible things to everybody at the bottom. Or you can look at it from the top down and say how wonderful our manifest destiny has changed, the face of the earth, etc. So you have a narrative embedded in a particular history or approach to history. And remember, narratives you have to believe or not. So it's essentially a historical attempt to describe. Here's a fact. This happened, and this happened, and this happened, this happened. Why did they happen? That's my interpretation. That's a narrative. That imposes values on what happened. Why this happened as opposed to this. Whether it was a good thing for it to happen or not. But so what George Vanderloo, who's the author of this, did was he collected kind of like an encyclopedia of all the information he could on religions of all sorts, and built this book as a like an encyclopedia where like water is the topic. So how is water taken in all these different religions? What's the significance of it? What's the significance of blood in all of these different religions, and so on? So you basically go by topic. What kind of human concern might we have? And then you look at all the different religions that have different approaches to it, and basically not say this religion is better than this religion, or it's just, here we have 15 religions, all of whom concern themselves with this particular topic. They think of it this way, they think of it this way, they think of it this way, they think of it this way. No conclusion. It's just clearly this is how the phenomena of blood has been perceived by all these different human societies. That's interesting.
It's like you're giving filters.
It's trying to avoid, it's bracketing out the filters, right?
Yeah, it's acknowledging that the filters are there.
Yeah,
So
okay.
you can tell which
Yeah.
filter you're looking for.
Yeah, if you're looking at it through a Hindu point of view. Right? Now, granted, and today, of course, it gets even more complex, because when you start saying, well, Hindu beliefs are so complex, you can't say that there's really just one set of. I mean, think about Christian beliefs. What kind of differences do you get from, say, Roman Catholics or Orthodox or Baptists, or people that basically make up their own version of Christian religion, which we have a lot of, actually. I remember one summer I was walking through the Spine, and there was 5 or 6 young people all lounging about there. Thought they might be students, although they looked not really student-like. There was something different about them, and I said hello, and I asked if they were there for classes, and they said, oh no, we just moved to Alaska. Oh, what are you doing? Oh, I'm going to start a church. He said, oh, that's really interesting. What's your religious affiliation? Oh, none. And I was like, oh, well, what seminary have you gone to? No, none. I'm just reading it on my own. I thought, there's a lot of that. And you're free to do that in our country. You don't have a religious authority that requires a certain thing before you call yourself a Christian or a Hindu or whatever. And in fact, just the way we treat people, we feel like it's wrong for someone who says, I'm a Christian and I believe in the devil, what? That's not a Christian. How can we impose our view of what Christianity is on a person who wants to call himself a Christian?